I want to apologize in advance. My allergies are currently trying to destroy me, so I may snarfle and sniffle and sneeze a good deal in this video, just to let you know. I'm old enough to remember that this time of year, mid to late summer, was known as convention season. We were pretty much smack dab in the middle of it. Convention season generally started sometime in late spring and usually went till early fall. Now that's not so much the case anymore. Back then it was dictated by big conventions like Origins, Gen Con, and the like. Nowadays, one of my favorite little conventions that I go to, and it's not that little, is in the last weekend of February, and that one's great. The convention I used to run was always in October. So convention season has spread out. So there's a lot of different places you can go for conventions. Why am I telling you this? Well, the reason I'm telling you this is because the topic I want to talk about today is teaching people how to play miniatures games. You can teach people locally, you can teach your friends, you can try to teach people at the shop, and you should, certainly. But one of the best places I've found to try to get new players involved in miniatures, the concept of miniatures, not a specific necessarily, game system, but the concept of playing miniatures games, is at gaming conventions. Today I'm going to talk about a couple of quick little games, well, really mainly one. I'm going to mention some, but I'm going to really mainly talk about one game. Skirmish games are probably the best games to demo at conventions. If you were to go to a convention and try to demo Warhammer or Warhammer 40K, it would be difficult. You would need 2 armies, and you'd have to have at least probably 500-point armies, and that's a lot of guys, generally. It's also a pretty difficult system to understand to some. I mean, there's a steep learning curve, especially if you've never played miniatures games before. So skirmish games work best for teaching, in my opinion, at conventions. And there are great skirmish games like Malifaux is relatively easy to teach, I think, at least to get the basic concepts. Games like Mercs, kind of the same kind of thing. With Mercs, you're basically down to 5 pieces per side, and that's all you've got. So that whole part of the equation, that whole, well, how many guys do I need, that's all gone. When you teach someone how to play a game at a convention, you don't normally say, well, what do you think you should start with? What kind of army do you think you give them a pre-built army. You say, here's your guys, here's my guys, I'm going to teach you how to play. What's a really good game, though, in my opinion, for teaching at conventions, and it's the one that I usually use when I go to local conventions and do demos of miniatures games, is a small independent skirmish game called Song of Blades and Heroes. Now this is my PDF version, which I printed out and put into a big 3-ring binder, and all the pages are plastic covered with those sleeves, and I've got multiple editions in here. I've got the main book, which is called Song of Blades and Heroes, as I mentioned, but then there's also a couple of add-ons that I've thrown in there as well. Song of Earth and Water, I believe. There's another one that I can't think of the name of. But this game is written by an Italian man, and his name is Andrea, and I think his last name is Sfigoli. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it properly. Sfilgoi? Anyway, I'm probably ruining your name. I apologize. Anyway, he wrote this game a number of years ago, 3-4 years ago, I believe, and I picked it up probably at least 2 years, if not 3 years ago. It's a very simple, yet still elegant system. Your miniatures all have a quality. So you've got this figure, and it has, let's say, a 3+ quality. That means when you roll a die on a 3 or higher, it's a success. But if you've got a guy who's maybe got a 5+ quality, well, that's not so good. That means he only gets successes on 5s and 6s on a 6-sider. Okay, so that's not so great. But you have the points to figure out, maybe your bosses are better quality, so there may be a 3+ or a 4+, whereas your normal run-of-the-mill soldier types may be 4+ and 5+. And you've got the ability to change all that and build your particular army. It's a simple concept for people to figure out. Secondly, you have a combat number, which is pretty much the number that you add to your die roll when you're fighting. If you've got a combat of 2, you roll a 6-sider, add 2 to it. The person you're fighting against, they have a combat of 4, they roll their 6-sider and add a 4 to it. This gets into some of the very simple kind of opposed roll actions that you see in a lot of different miniatures games, specifically in close combat. In range, you have opposed rolls as well, but in that, if I'm the shooter because it's my turn and I shoot at you and you win the opposed roll, that just means you didn't get hit. In close combat, in Song of Blades and Heroes, if it's my turn and I attack you, but you win the combat, that means you did wounds to me, or, you know what I mean? Even though it's not your turn, just like in the real world, if I ran up to a guy and tried to punch him, but he hit me harder first, even though it's my turn, because I have the initiative or whatever, he still, you know, knocked me down and made me not want to get back up again. That's the way things work in the real world, and that's why this game is really kind of interesting. Another part of the very elegant system is every turn, when it's your turn, you can decide for each figure in your army when you want to activate them. You say, I want to activate this guy first. It's not a unit type game. You're not moving like in 40K or other games where you're not moving squads of guys, you're moving singular guys. And it's real simple in that you look at a guy and you say, well, I can roll up to 3 dice for that guy. His quality is 4+. So if I roll 3 dice, if I roll 3, 4 or higher, I will get 3 actions because I made 3 successes. Now you'd say, why wouldn't you always roll 3 dice to try to get the most abilities for, you know, the most actions? The reason is because on any given roll, if you make 2 failures, your turn ends. So on the first guy that you decide to pick, once it becomes your turn, if you roll 2 dice and they're both failures, you're done. It's back to your opponent. You didn't get to move any more guys, you don't get to activate anybody, it's over. So you have this sort of gamble where you're like, well, if I only roll 1 die on this guy, there's no way for me to get 2 failures. I could get 1 failure, but then I just go to the next guy. So you're constantly having to weigh this sort of, you know, benefit analysis, like, well, I mean, the last guy, you always roll 3 dice because it's your last guy, so your turn's over anyway, so you might as well go for broke. So you're always kind of trying to figure out who the last guy is that you're going to, you know, work in there and try to do that Hail Mary. But it's a great system. There's a lot of extra add-on powers and, you know, things like that. And the extra books not only add in different scenarios, but they add in more powers. But the main base book, I think when I bought the PDF, it was $8. I think if you get a printed version, it's 15. So it's a super cheap, really easy, you know, thing to add to your collection. And you can take 2, you know, conventions and show people how to play it. You can sit people down who've never played a miniatures game before, and they'll be learning it in seriously 2 minutes, and they will really get the hang of it and really enjoy it. Kids love it, that kind of stuff. That's the kind of thing that you want to do to get people involved in miniatures. You can take your own painted miniatures if you want. You know, the thing is that you're going to be having people touching them and possibly breaking them. You're talking about possibly kids you might be playing with. So what I always do is I always take pre-painted Dungeons and Dragons miniatures that were made by Wizards of the Coast. I bought a bunch of them when they were out. I bought a bunch of them on eBay. Now I know Paizo has Pathfinder pre-painted miniatures. You take those things, they're bendy, they're pre-painted, they're real tough. It doesn't matter. You can get Cheetos on them, you can get soda on them, whatever. They clean up real easy in the sink. It works great. And you're not really concerned about someone ruining your nice models that you really like, that you like to play with. You can bring these things. I keep squads in little plastic baggies with a note that says what each squad is. I keep them in a shoebox, and I take them to a convention along with a bunch of terrain and a big piece of felt. I lay it down, throw it on my terrain, bring out the guys. I have some sheets. I've got this book. I start teaching people, you know, and that's all it takes. People will take this back with them to wherever they're from when you teach somebody at a local convention or even at a big convention. And it will kind of, at least with me, when I first played my first miniatures game, it really stuck with me, and I really was interested in trying to figure out, well, you know, what if I had done this or what, and then I really started to get interested into it. Some people will play it and they'll have a good time and they won't really think about it anymore. But other people, hopefully, will take a look at what they've been shown in miniatures games and really start to kind of get the gears turning and thinking about, well, that's really, you know, the way that I like to play. Role-playing games, yeah, they're cool and everything. Magic and card games, yeah, that's fine. but the strategy and the kind of getting involved with a whole group of guys moving across the board to try to take an objective, the people that you want to get are the people who are going to hopefully keep doing that and keep being interested in that. And eventually, they're going to possibly be an opponent that you're going to play again at another convention.